Hi, and welcome back to BoardBee. Now, when we left off, we had a fairly working game, but still a little bit boring. So let's start by opening up NESmaker again. And load our project. Ghost Hunter Pete. There we go. Okay, so our player can move, our screen can scroll, but Ghost Hunter Pete is all alone in this game. So let's do something about that today. Now, before we get started making monsters, we need to take a look at palettes. Now, the reason we need to look at palettes is that these things can often get a little bit confusing. So, what should we do first? Well, let's take a look at Ghost Hunter Pete, our player object. This is what it looks like right now. So, before we continue, let's take a look at this. This is our subpalette 1, subpalette 2, subpalette 3, and subpalette 4. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, for each of your objects in NESmaker, you have 4 subpalettes. Now, for each of these tiles, you can choose one of these subpalettes. So right now, you may think, what's going on right now? Well, let me show you something. I want Ghost Hunter Pete to have yellow hair. Right now he has brown hair. I want to change it to yellow. So what happens if I just change this color over here? Now let's right click brown over here. Let's choose yellow. No, his pants change as well. I didn't want that. Okay, let's change it back to brown. What we need to do right now is that we need to give his top 2 tiles another subpalette. So right now, all of the tiles of Ghost Hunter Pete is set up with subpalette 1. So you can see any of these tiles I choose, they're all selected with subpalette 1. Alright, but all of these are player pal. Yeah, that's right, all of these are player pal. So let's change that right now. So where it says player pal, click in there and let's write a 1 there. So now it says player pal 1, just click rename. Okay, fine. But he's still the same color. So let's go down here to sub 2 and let's change this to monster palette 1. Okay. So what happens if we click here now? Okay. Click in this tile, subpalette 2. Okay. Well, it's definitely a different color up here. Let's just call this palette player pal 2. Click rename. So I still want his face to have the same skin color as before. So let's right click our blue here and choose the same color as before. Okay, he's starting to look more normal. So what about his hair? Well, I said I wanted him to have yellow hair. So let's right click our purple hair and click yellow, like that. Okay, well, now he has yellow hair. But his eyes are also yellow. They might be hard to see. So let's deal with that later. Let's just continue changing his top 2 tiles. Now right now we are in idle right. And that's just 1 frame. So we're done with idle right. Let's do the same thing for idle left. Now we can just click in one of these top two tiles and choose subpalette 2. And do the same thing for the other tile up here, subpalette 2. So now these two top tiles of our player are marked with subpalette 2. And the bottom two tiles are marked with subpalette 1. Now I'm going to try not to confuse you here, because all this stuff with palettes can get confusing. But try to remember that our player has now got two subpalettes. One palette for his top two tiles and one palette for his bottom two tiles. So how does this work? Well, the subpalettes you choose in here on your player object, those are important, because NESmaker is going to store what palette you chose for each of your player's tiles. Not necessarily the right colors, but the right subpalette. Now I know we're already starting to get confused there, but it's fine. It's fine, because I'm going to show you right now how this works. So let's go to Overworld, to our game screen. And as you can see, what? I just changed his hair to yellow. Why is it brown? Let's go to Screen Info. And remember that normally every screen in NESmaker has its own screen info. But if you remember from last episode, on scrolling games, the whole scrolling level only reads this first screen. So remember, these screens, whatever you set up on these screens, are ignored on scrolling levels. So this is our first screen. So obviously the screen info here is important. So let's click Screen Info. And let's go to our second tab up here that says Day Monsters. So these four subpalettes, those are set up for this screen right here. So if you remember, we just chose subpalette 2 for the top two tiles of our player. Now, right now, this screen has player pal 1 for all the subpalettes. So what happens if I change subpalette 2? Let's change that from player pal 1 to player pal 2. And there we go. Let's click OK. Now he has yellow hair. So this is where it can get a little confusing. We have all these palettes and subpalettes and all this stuff. Just remember that when you're in your object over here, this is a player object, and whatever subpalette you choose in here, that's stored with our object. So it doesn't remember what colors you chose, but it does remember what subpalette you chose. So right now our player object has subpalette 2 stored for the top two tiles, and subpalette 1 stored for the bottom two tiles. So that's all information stored with our object. So then, then the screen info decides what colors we choose for each of these subpalettes. So right now that means that for every screen that we want Ghost Hunter Pete to look like this, we need to set up every screen like that with player pal 1 for subpalette 1 and player pal 2 for subpalette 2. So if we set up a new screen and we have player pal 1 for all of these, then Ghost Hunter Pete is going to look like this. So as long as we want him to have yellow hair, as long as we want him to use the ones we set up on his object, we need to choose player pal 2 for subpalette 2. I know. This is confusing stuff, but let's try to let it sink in. Let's continue coloring our player object. So let's go back here to Ghost Hunter Pete, the player object right here. So we already chose the right palette for the top of his head on the idle right. We did the same thing for idle left. Now we need to do this for every frame. So the easiest thing is that you do this from the start. And I'm going to show you that when you start making monsters. So idle right, idle left, let's do the same thing for his walk animation. So just click the frame you want. You want to change subpalette on. Let's click this one and click subpalette 2. This one, subpalette 2. And since this is a walk animation, we have another frame. So let's choose frame 2. Click this frame over here and subpalette 2. Let's click the top left one here and subpalette 2. So you can see first I choose the frame and then I click what subpalette to use. So now his walk right animation is okay. So let's do the same thing for walk left. Click one of his top tiles and subpalette 2. The other tile, subpalette 2. And let's do the same thing for frame 2. Click the top frame, top right, subpalette 2, top left, subpalette 2. So now his walk left animation is okay as well. Alright, just 2 more to go. So let's choose jump right. Let's click top left, subpalette 2, top right, subpalette 2. And finally, jump left animation. So top right, subpalette 2, top left, subpalette 2. Now the cool thing here is that normally game objects on the NES can only have 3 colors, like you see here. But if you do it this way, you can have more than 3 colors. Now remember, this top left one, this black one, that's not actual color. That's a transparent color that you see here. So we don't count that. We only count these 3. But if you do it this way, as you can see, now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 colors on our player. So obviously you can mix and match whatever you want. You'll probably need to experiment a little with this, but you can make pretty colorful graphics with this way of doing it. Okay, so now he looks okay, but I'm not happy with his eyes. I don't want his eyes to look like this, because as you can see up here, you almost can't see his eyes. So let's change that. Let's go back to our pixel editor down here. And if you remember, let's load BMP file, and our player graphic is all the way down here in game object tiles. So let's open up that one. Here we go. Now remember, these colors are the default NES colors, so let's not go into that. Let's just click this button that says Enable Palette Translation. And we have changed colors, but we have the background palette selected. So let's click this one, and now we're in the monster palettes. So before we do anything else, let's click this 8 button over here. So that lets us group pixels in 8x8 tiles. So now it's easier to see where we can draw. Alright, so again, now we have these 4 sub-palettes. Now, again, this is another time where it can get a little confusing. Even though you have 4 colors, you have 4 palettes in here. These 4 palettes, those are only, let's choose player palette 2 here. So the pixel editor can only have 1 palette at a time. And whatever you draw in here, that's just for the pixel editor. The real palettes are stored here. These palettes are stored with your object. So down in the pixel editor, this only lets you see how things look. And as you can see, this area can only have 1 palette selected at a time. So let's try our hardest to keep it simple. Let's try. Right now, let's just worry about the top of the sprite, his head. And if you remember, that was player pal 2. So let's change this white one right here. Just right click, and I want this white one to be this one, the 0C color. There we go. The reason I wanted this is because now I can paint his eyes like that. And since we have a very simple animation on our character, we only have 2 frames to change. So now his eyes are going to look like that. But the yellow and his skin color, those colors are very close. So let's see if we can make some outline around his hair to make it a little more visible that he has hair. So if we just draw around here, oh, this is going to look a little strange, but let's just do this. Alright, and let's do the same thing for this other frame. So now, let's see. Yeah, and whoops. And there we go. Alright. So now we can see his eyes, and we can see that he has some hair. Now it's gonna look a little strange, I know, but it's only for demonstration purposes. So now let's save this file. Quick save. Okay, so how does he look if we go back to our player object? It's going to take a few seconds, but there we go. So this is what it looks like right now. So let's take a look at our game in the overworld. Let's go to our first screen. This is what it looks like right now. So it's a little strange with that hair, but let's just say it's fine. Okay, so that's a little bit about palettes. But we wanted to create monsters, so let's do that right now. Alright. Now, before we do that, just a quick reminder. In NESmaker or on the NES, you have two different types of palettes. And as you can see here in NESmaker, you have one that says palettes over here. These palettes that only says palettes, those are the background palettes. Those are the colors that you use for your background. So these colors right here, these are the palettes under here. In fact, if you can see here, it says palette 0. Now I'm gonna give this palette another name. I'm gonna right click, rename, and call this, let's call it outside. So the first palette here is called outside now. So if we go back to our overworld, to our first screen, the palette for this screen is the one called outside. And every palette has 4 sub-palettes. So remember that. So palettes, background palettes, monster palettes, those are the palettes for your sprites, for all the objects in your game. So even though they're called monster palettes, they are the palettes you're going to use for your player, for the power-ups, for all the objects in your game, including monsters, of course. So remember, 2 types of palettes. This one called palettes, this other one called monster palettes. Palettes for background palettes, for backgrounds. Monster palettes for objects. Okay, let's just try to remember that. Okay, so why am I talking about this? Well, because if you go into monster palettes right now, we can see that under here we have player pal 1 and player pal 2. We already renamed these. We already chose colors for these. But let's make another one right here. This one that says Monster Palette 2. Monster Palette 2 is a fairly long name, and often these NESmaker menus are pretty narrow, so you can't read it. So let's just change this to Mon Pal 1 instead of Monster Palette 1. So this is my Mon Pal 1. Okay, so if we go back to our pixel editor down here, this is our player graphics, and if you remember, that's in the game object tiles file. Now if we're going to draw a monster, we can't draw it in here, so let's leave this guy, click the load BMP file up here. And if you remember from the first episode, when we're drawing monsters, we need to go all the way down to where it says monster. So let's choose our first file here, monster 000. So choose the first monster file and click open. Alright, so this is where we can start drawing our monster. Now let's try to keep it tidy. And right now we have player 1 for this subpalette, player 2 for that subpalette. So let's just keep it tidy and click Mon Pal 1 for this subpalette. Now these are the default colors, and white, that's fine. I need white now. I'm going to draw a ghost, but I'm not happy with these other colors, so let's choose this red one to, well, another red, and instead of blue I want gray right there. Okay, so I'm gonna draw a ghost that's, let's give it the same size as our player. So I'm going to choose white. Make sure I have the pencil tool selected. And I'm going to start drawing my ghost. Like that. Okay, something like this. Just color him in like that. And there we go. All right. So let's give him some spooky eyes. Like that. And let's give him some shades to emphasize this is a ghost, like that. Sure, why not? And let's copy this guy. So choose this tile selection tool. Select tiles for cut and paste. Let's use that one. Let's select all these 4 tiles. Control C. Move over here. Hold down Shift, Control and V. There we go. Now let's select this other tool. Select a region for cut and paste. Select our ghost here. Control C, copy. Let's move him 1 pixel further down, like that. Alright, select our pencil tool and let's choose black and just erase the top, the bottom, like that. And let's change a little bit here just to make it look like his cape is moving just a little bit. Just give the illusion that he's moving. Sure. Something like that. Yeah, that's probably fine. Okay, there we go. That's my ghost animation. So just draw 2 frames like that and click Save BMP. All right. So now you're going to notice that there are several similarities to when we set up our player. So let's go to our monster graphic banks here. And let's choose Graphics Bank 0. And click on Monsters here. So the first thing we'll notice is that this is the right file. This is where we drew our ghost. Now everything here is probably very familiar to you, because this is exactly the same interface as when we set up our player object up here. So it's exactly the same thing, but now we're setting up a monster. But everything is exactly the same. Now one thing you need to be aware of when setting up monsters is this save button up here. Because if you do a lot of work in here and don't click save and just by accident click out here, all your work in here is going to be lost. So before you do anything over here, remember to click save the first time you set up your monster. Let me show you what I mean. Alright, so first of all, let's set up our monster graphics. Now this guy is 2 tiles tall and 2 tiles wide. Now, again, this palette thing. He's red right now. Alright, let's make him the right color. Now, if you remember, subpalette 1 and subpalette 2 were used for the player. So, to avoid any confusion here, let's just choose the right ones. So, player pal 1 for subpalette 1, player pal 2 for subpalette 2, and for subpalette 3, I'm going to choose monpal 1. So this is going to be the palette for my ghost. Alright, so make sure you have sub 3 selected right now. Sub 3 selected. This is important because this is the information that's stored with our object. So when we're finished with this object, it's going to remember to use sub 3 in the game. So click sub 3 and place your cursor up here and hold down your shift key and drag down like that. There's our ghost. Now this guy is not going to have an idle animation. I want him to be moving all the time. So let's give him a frame count of 2. Now we can choose frame 2. And again, make sure we choose sub 3 here. So click sub 3. Let's go to our other frame here. Hold down your shift key and drag down here. Alright. Now let's see how this looks. I'm going to view this in the preview window. So let's try animation speed 3. Click play. Don't worry about the colors for now. Yeah, sure. That's fine. That's our ghost moving. Okay, so if you remember when we set up our player, we went to the object details, so let's do that now. Now animation types, it says default now. Let's change that. Rename, let's change it to move and click OK. And if you remember, these 8 states, click close here, they are here in the manage animations. So let's click that one. Click default animation and let's rename this to move left. Click rename, click add, and let's rename this to move right. Click rename. Okay, let's close this one. Let's go back to object details. Now we only have one animation type for a monster right now, and that should be enough. But remember, we need to set directions. So in animation type move, for is right animation, we need to choose move right. And he has chosen move left for all of these, so left says move left, so that's fine. And remember, we don't need to worry about up or down for this game. So right, move right, left, move left. Perfect. Alright, so let's move on to our next tab here that says details. Okay, this is our monster. So let's just click monster here, and that's all we need to do to tell NESmaker that this is a monster. Alright, solid object reaction. If you remember a plan, I wrote that this ghost is going to reverse direction when it hits a solid object. So it says solid object reaction here. Also, let's choose reverse direction. So when this ghost hits a solid object, it's just going to move the other way. And let's do the same thing for edge object reaction. Now this one says move opposite direction, but it's the same thing. It's going to reverse direction. Alright, now this is a ghost, so I want him to move fairly slowly. So I'm going to choose, let's choose 14, that's fine. And acceleration speed. Now I want to try to give him sort of a floating effect. I don't want him to move super fast right away. So I'm going to try to make him accelerate slowly. So I'm going to put acceleration speed somewhere here in the middle. Let's choose 91, sure. Let's try that. And jump speed, we don't need to worry about that for this guy. He's never going to jump. So let's choose 14 for normal speed and 91 for acceleration speed. Let's see what that looks like. All right, that's details. Let's take a look at actions over here. Now, if you remember, I said that all the action steps, or at least some of them, are predefined in NESmaker. 0 was idle, 1 was walk, and so on. So that mostly applies to the player. So we're kind of free to choose what we want for the monsters, except one. This number 7 here, that's the hurt state. So if you want your monster to have a hurt state, that's number 7. But let's wait a little bit for that. Let's just choose action step 0 right now. Action step 0, and it already says move, so that's fine. This is the move animation. But for action, I want this guy to move left. Now that doesn't mean that he can never move right. This is just his starting action. So when the game starts, he's going to move left. But because we said that he's going to reverse direction when he hits a solid object, he's going to start moving left until he hits a solid object, then he moves the other way. So just choose move left here. And end action and end animation. We don't need to worry too much about that for now. If you want to make some advanced stuff in your game, you can do a lot with these. You can destroy your object, you can go to a warp, you can restart your game, do all kinds of things here. So for example, end animation. If we wanted to restart the game when the animation of this ghost was over, we could do that here, but let's wait with that kind of stuff. So just keep loop for both of these. Make sure you have move and action, move left. Remember, don't get confused now. When it says move left here, that's the action, the actual action that makes this object move left, even though we wrote move left for our animation. So action, the actual movement. Alright, but this is an animation, so you need to give it an animation speed. I'm going to try animation speed 3 here, like that. Alright, so finally the bounding box. Let's go here and let's give him a bounding box, something like that. Now remember, as I said for the player, leave one line of pixels down below. That way we won't get any problems with the sprites or the characters getting stuck in the ground. Just leave one line of pixels down here. And if you want, you can do that on the top as well. But at least on the bottom, that's important. Leave one line of pixels there. Okay, click close on this one. Now, remember, whatever you do, don't go clicking over here now. Because all the work we've done now would go away. So before anything happens right now, let's give this guy a name. Now, I will be making more than this guy, more ghost monsters than this guy. So I'm gonna call this guy Small Ghost. And now we can click save. And when we click save right now, you can see that he appears under monsters here. Now we can breathe a sigh of relief, because now we can click over here and our monster is still fine over here, and all the work that we did in here is saved. So just remember that when you're setting up a monster, don't click over here until you hit the save button here. Now you just need to do that the first time, because as you see, when I have selected monster here, there's no save button anymore. But when you click on the monster folder here, now you have the save button. And until you click that save button, the monster won't be saved here. And you won't be asked if you want to save your changes. They will just go away. So be careful about that. When you're setting up your monster, before you click anywhere over here, click the save button. Alright, so now we have our monster object. But we're not quite done yet. Let's take a look at our overworld. Now the way you place monsters in your game is by right-clicking on your screen. But if I right-click right now, it says place player, set warp in location, reset all placements, or modify attribute. None of these is saying anything about placing our monster. Well, that's because every screen, if you go to screen info, every screen needs to know what monster group to use. So if I click day monsters right now, it doesn't have any monster group. And in fact, we haven't made a monster group yet. So let's do that right now. So if we go back to our small ghost over here, below him we have our monster groups. So let's click that one. And let's just call this group ghosts. And if you see here, the tile set, it says tile 0. Now what does that mean? Well, tile 0, that's the BCK CHR000 file. That's the tile we chose here in the pixel editor. So because we drew in that one and made our monster there, that's now this tile 0. So when I click this menu, I can choose small ghost here. Now, don't worry too much about this. There's enough to worry about here. So let's just remember to give every monster a monster group. So if we made more monsters and in the tile 0, we could choose 3 more here. So every monster group can have 4 monsters. But for now, let's just choose this guy. So ghosts, small ghost, click save. And if you see, we just got our first monster group down here. Okay, so now if we go back to overworld, go back to a screen here, and if I place my cursor here and right click, I still can't place a monster. Well, if you remember what I just said, we need to go to screen info up here, to day monsters, and we need to choose our day monster group. So if we click this menu, now we can select our ghosts monster group. And again, all this palette stuff and these colors. Why is this guy red right now? Well, let's take a look at these sub palettes. We have player palette 1 for sub palette 1, player palette 2 for sub palette 2, and we have player palette 1 for these two. Now remember, when we set up our monster, our ghost here, we chose sub palette 3. So right now this guy is using this palette and it's player pal 1, so I don't want that. I want this sub palette 3 to use mon pal 1. So what happens if I click mon pal 1 now? Now the monster has the right colors. So because we set up our monster object with sub palette 3, that's what the object remembers. But to get the right colors, we need to set them up on the screen info. So if we click OK right now, now I can place monsters. So remember, screen info, day monsters, and day monster group. Until you choose a monster group right here, you can't place any monsters on your screen. Okay, let's try this out. Let's right click here, place monster 1, and now we have a lot of stuff here. We have our small ghost here, but we also have a lot of other stuff here. What's this other stuff? Well, all of these are our game objects. So let's say we made an extra life or some pickup object. Under game objects, we would get them here. So we could place an extra life or a power up or whatever. Let's come back to that later. The important thing is that you can right click on the screen and you can place a monster. And for every screen you can place up to 4 monsters. As you can see, right now we just have this one monster. But if we had more than one monster, we can have, if you remember, in a monster group we could have 4 monsters in every monster group. So we could have had 4 different monsters on this screen. But let's just again try to keep it simple. Place monster 1, small ghost. And there we are. Finally, we have our first monster in our game. Now the question is, does it work? Can he move? And will he reverse direction when he hits a solid object? Okay, let's take a look. Let's click our export and test button over here. And whoops, it almost works, but you can see we forgot something. So let's fix that right now. Let's go back to our small ghost monster. So why did he glitch out like that? Well, he didn't glitch out. We just set up animation for move left, but we didn't do the same thing for move right. So let's do that right now. Let's give him a move right animation. And again, make sure we have chosen subpalette 3 here. So do that first. Choose subpalette 3 for our ghost. And hold down your shift key and just drag it down here. And right now you just have 1 frame, so let's give him 2 frames. And let's choose frame number 2 down here. Hold down shift key and drag down here. Alright, so now we have our animation, but we're doing it for move right, so let's flip this animation like that. There we go. So now just note that still there's no save button here. So this save button I was talking about, that's only the first time you're setting up your monster. Now we can move away from our monster, and our changes are still saved, as you can see. Alright, let's go back to our game here and let's try this again. Export and test. And there we go. Our monster is moving back and forth. When he hits a solid object, he reverses direction. Alright, now it looks even more like a game. So the question is, can I jump over this guy? Yes, I can. But what happens when I collide with this guy? Alright, now he's hurting me. You already have a knockback. So that's already programmed into NESmaker. When a player hits a monster, you get some knockback. Alright, so we've talked about a lot of stuff today. So I think it's enough for now. So I just think we'll just save our project, and I'll just see you very soon, and we'll continue making more on Ghost Hunter Pete. So have a nice day, and I'll see you soon.